Don't get me wrong, man. I'm not telling you this story because I want you to be afraid. I'm telling you because I want you to be prepared. Anyone who knows anything about Alice Wallengard, the Mad Queen, could tell you the rumors that circulate. Basically, whatever you might be expecting, even with your knowledge of her being a vampire, just throw it in the garbage. The moment you have an expectation, it will be broken. It's said that fighting Alice Wallengard is akin to simply giving up all beliefs in how reality is supposed to work. That the only way to actually survive fighting her is to simply accept the madness. Accept that you're not going to understand anything. That nothing will make sense. That reason does not exist. That reality is simply some notebook with blank pages that she seems to just fill in with whatever the hell she feels like. That's apparently what it's supposed to be like fighting Alice Wallengard. And I want you to be prepared for it. I want you to know, beyond all reason, beyond all doubt, that you don't know anything at all, except that you know nothing, and fight anyways. It's the only way you have any chance of making it out. Ugh, he said, sighing deeply as he began to grip the wheel a bit harder, taking another drag of his cigarette. Ugh, now that that's out of the way, next on the list, I'm going to have to give you some information on vampires. Primarily, this is the part where I tell you how not to die, at least according to the regular rules of vampires and their abilities. But once again, these are just things you might want to look out for. When we're dealing with this woman, it's best to take it with a grain of salt. First thing you have to know about vampires, the older they get, the stronger they get. Every year on a vampire's life only makes them more powerful. Vampires sustain themselves by drinking the blood of human beings. This much you know, of course. However, the part that isn't included in the Hollywood horror movies is the fact that the reason that vampires sustain themselves on human blood is because human blood carries within it our life essence in more than just a physical format. Our blood carries in it the magical energies that our bodies produce, even our souls. Those energies can be found in our blood, swirling around our body, just stirred into the mix. So when a vampire drinks that blood, they're also drinking our life essence, our magical ability, the energy from our very souls is all drained away in the mix. And that is what actually fuels a vampire. The physical blood in and of itself is next to useless, without the magic that comes from the individual. And yes, kid, that does mean that everybody has magic. Anyone who's anyone could use it if they had the knowledge to. That is, if you have the knowledge to. And that is some hard shit to get a hold of, I'll tell you that much. For all the years I've been doing this, even my collection is fairly limited. But I suppose that's beyond the point. Back to vampires. Vampires possess a myriad of special abilities unique to them. The ones you'll find in basically any vampire are, of course, enhanced speed, strength, reflexes, perceptual abilities, night vision. Those are all basic things that most of the horror movies actually cover. The things they don't tend to cover are the magical abilities of vampires. You see, vampires are actually a special breed when it comes to most magical races or monsters. Unlike most others, they can still use magic, but we'll get to that. Right now, we'll focus on their abilities that simply happen to be magical in nature. Higher level vampires possess a number of very troublesome abilities, such as near instantaneous regeneration, meaning you can do an extraordinary amount of damage to one, and then they simply heal it back, as if they weren't injured to begin with. Any vampire's capability to do this usually depends on their age and power, and the older they are, the more powerful they are, the more effectively they can do it. With someone on Alice Wallengar's level, I wouldn't be surprised at all if even if you chopped off all her limbs, she just sprouted them right back. Next thing on the list, vampires are also shapeshifters. Masters of it, in fact. They can change their physical state, almost at will once they become old enough. The older they get, the more changes they become capable of. The first one they gain access to is the ability to shapeshift into a basic animal form. Usually it takes the form of a cat or a dog, something like that. Something that lets them get around without being noticed. After that, the next ability that they usually gain access to is the ability to dissipate their body altogether. That usually only comes after about 100 years or so, giving them the capability to shift their form into mist or smoke. Sometimes even a flurry of smaller animals, like hornets or bats, birds even, and then simply travel like a swarm, a flock of birds heading in a single direction. That ability can be very troublesome. It allows them to move around fairly easily without having to worry about being harmed. When vampires are in these states, they're basically untouchable. Even if you try to shoot or stab or slash at them, it doesn't really harm them. So basically, it's a giant pain in the ass. Next on the super shitty list of things that you might have to deal with is mesmeric ability. The ability to entrance people, manipulate them, trick them, convince them of false things, make them see things that aren't there, behave in ways that break their normal character. Your basic weak vampires never have this kind of ability. It's something that you only have to worry about with the old ones, the strong ones. The ability to magically enforce delusions, visions, alter your behavior, convince you to do their bidding. It's a very powerful ability, but there's a trick to it. In order to use these little tricks, they have to make eye contact with you. And I'm talking about a sustained gaze. Just catching their eyes for a moment won't work. They have to look you in the eye, for a little while at least. But after that, you're caught in their spell. So if her eyes start to glow really pretty colors at you, look the hell away. I don't know if that symbiote of yours can stop you from being affected by a vampire. And I'd rather not have somebody with superpowers turning on me in the middle of a fight. So pay attention and don't get caught in it. And finally, we come to the piece de la resistance, true magic. This is going to be one of the primary concerns when it comes to out-and-out combat, just like their superhuman strength and shape-shifting. Vampires, unlike many other supernatural entities, somehow retain their ability to use magic after they become vampires. And Alice Wallengard was an accomplished magic caster long before she became a vampire, or long after, depending on how you look at her timeline. Once again, it doesn't make sense, but regardless, she can use magic, and she's damn good at it. As dangerous as any high-level mage could ever hope of being, even more so in fact. So you're gonna have to look out for magic spells, which shouldn't be all out too hard. They usually tend to be pretty flashy. You see a giant ball of fire heading your direction? Move. The floor starts turning into quicksand? Jump. Most of those things tend to be basic reasoning, so you really don't need too much of a lesson on how to deal with them, especially with your experience with people with superpowers. They're pretty similar, except the fact that magic usually requires incantations, spoken words. It's not an absolute necessity, but most of the time they do use them.